Hello and welcome to Mindscapes, our series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, visions and philosophy defined contemporary India. My guest today belongs to a new generation of politicians who had their baptism not during the freedom struggle, but during the struggle for restoration of democracy during the emergency. I'm delighted to welcome Arun Jaitley. Arun, welcome. Tell me, you've been in office for a little more than 3 months, and how does this compare from the satisfactions and frustrations of being a lawyer to being a minister?
Well, the two areas are entirely different. In the first instance, when you are practicing law, it takes a lot of your time. You work for an incentive. Law can also become a kind of a passion. In my case, it was. It still is. When you become a minister, all your time belongs to the people. Mm-hmm. There are two facets. There are areas which you can really get involved and think you can contribute to improve the situation. And then there are areas where you have to deal with a lot of people, all kinds of people, and you have to satisfy, or at least attempt to satisfy all of them.
So what are the incentives when you're a minister?
I won't be hypocritical. I think one of the most important incentives is, it's a great process of learning India. And that's what I seem to be enjoying the most. You meet all kinds of people, you visit all kinds of places which ordinarily you wouldn't have. You get into the process of governmental functioning. You are framing laws, you are participating in parliament debates, you are addressing meetings, you are speaking in colleges, you are speaking at various functions. You are contributing as a part of the system. As lawyers, we were only finding the loopholes in law. Now we sit and plug them when we draft them.
You know, you mentioned that you didn't want to be hypocritical. How much of being a minister or a politician involves that? I mean, after all, you have to be nice to everybody. You have to smile at people.
That's a question of your social etiquette. You at least must be nice to people who come to you, because people who come to you, many of them do need help. But then there are a whole series of people who don't need help, who want to manage the system, who come to you. You still have to smile at them. You may not necessarily help them.
And do you feel sometimes compromised as a public official, as a politician, part of a system, of a party, of a government? Inevitably, there isn't everything that you end up agreeing with or support, but you have to. You're not part of a system.
I concede it can happen. Fortunately, it has not happened so far. Mm-hmm. And that's the real test. I don't know how I'll fare when it comes to the crunch.
Mm-hmm. You have in your sort of distinguished career as a lawyer, you've sort of championed many causes. Have you felt that you have always agreed with them, or have they been things that you have felt strongly about, fundamentally because your role as a lawyer was simultaneous to your role as a public person?
In a large number of cases, are those where your convictions don't come into play, which are the run-of-the-mill matters. It is only some cases which impinge upon public issues. And that is where you have to make sure that there is no conflict between your own ideas, ideals, ideology, and those issues. And you normally try and avoid those cases. But there are a large number of cases which are routine matters which don't impinge upon public issues. So even if you feel that your client is not always right, it's a part of your professional duty to defend him.
You've been a part of the BJP since 1980, since the time it was founded. Have you felt this ideological consistency with all its positions throughout? Has that crisis come up for you at all that you'd mentioned?
At times things happen when you're not very happy about. But then a commitment to a political party has many dimensions. One is ideology, one is the whole environment, one is the human relationships. In a case like mine, I joined the ABVP in 1970. For 30 years, I've either been with the ABVP or the BJP. I've virtually grown with the party. I've grown with the ideology. And you become emotionally so much a part of it that even when there is something which you don't like, well, you don't want to, you can speak out within the party, but you don't make a public issue out of it. It's like being a member of a family. It's more than an ideology. Something goes wrong in the family, you don't break the family. You try and reconcile, you try and improve things. A party is almost like that.
Why have you not felt the sort of the impulse to get into sort of the more the rumbustious electoral politics?
Well, in my case, I have never planned these things. There was one possibility that I could have got into it. This is just after the emergency. I had been released from jail. I was campaigning for the Janata Party. I was closely associated with the late Shri Jayaprakash Narayan. And I was asked to contest the Lok Sabha election, only to realize that I was short of age. I couldn't have done it. Maybe at that time, if I had contested an election, I may have been a full-time politician bulk of my life. But that did not happen. I decided to get into law, settle down in a career. And once I got settled in law as a career, I enjoyed practice. There were a lot of cases I did. I was reasonably busy. And law became so much a part of it that to leave law and get into electoral politics was no longer an instinct. But nonetheless, I was committed to my party, so I continued my association. I continued to work for it, whatever little job was assigned to me. And even this time when I was asked to leave my practice and jump into it, it was not a surprise? It was not a surprise to me as it was to many other friends of mine.
Well, to go back to 1970 and you're working with the Bharatiya Janata Party, what drew you, what brought you into politics that early in such a sustained manner?
When you join college, that's the age where everybody looks for his kind of an idealism. That was a time where people were moving leftwards. You try and study ideologies, you try and study ideas, you get introduced to individuals, you get impressed with individuals, you get introduced to organizations, you get impressed with organizations.
Who were the individuals that impacted you at that time?
Let me tell you, I came across one gentleman who's not very well known publicly, but within the ABVP he is very important. A great disciplinarian. He later on went on to become the All India President of the ABVP. A gentleman, he teaches in the Delhi University. His name is Mr. Rajkumar Bhatia. He became in college a kind of a role model for all of us. He was a hardcore organizational man, very disciplined. And he's the man who really guided us during this period. He's only a few years older than me. We were in jail together. And he's been one of the men I was most impressed with those days.
So what was it like being in jail for 19 months? You were just whisked away from a student demonstration at the university.
Jail is a state of mind. If you are in jail with a sense of guilt, it's a terrible feeling. But if you are in jail with a sense of commitment, a sense of pride, and that's the situation in the emergency, I think you reconcile to it. There are a lot of things you can do. You live in groups. You live with groups of people who are completely divergent from you. We had friends from the Anand Marg, from the Jamaat-e-Islami, from the Akali Dal, a large number of young students who were arrested during the emergency, some senior political leaders. So you can reconcile. You can read a lot. You can play a lot. You can meet a lot of people. You can get into a lot of political discussions.
Have there been periods of disillusionment since you came out from the heady commitment of being in jail? And
well, at times there is. And the disillusionment is not about yourself or about events. the disillusionment is about the deterioration that comes in public life. And since you happen to be identified with it, and people at large may feel, well, all of you are like this. That's a disillusionment that sets in. But then I don't think cynicism is really the answer. You have to be a part of the system, and you have to carry a team with you. You have to be a part of a larger team. You have to work for an improvement.
So what are the sort of aspirations and goals that you have set for yourself in public life?
But let me honestly tell you, in terms of power positions, none. In terms of party positions, none. For instance, I've been working for my party and earlier the ABVP for 30 years. This is the first time I've held office. Assuming I had not held office this time, 5 years from now, I would still have been working in elections for my party, and 10 years from now, I'd still have been working with it. If I go out of office, I'll continue to do that. It's not really the office that I am seeking for. But once you are in a political field, you certainly want to create an individual impact. You want your party's image, your government's image to grow up. And I've always felt that if you are in public life, what is your greatest possession? Is it the chair you hold? Is it the power you wield? I think much more than that is the credibility that you acquire by using your position. And credibility comes from various factors. How you conduct yourself, what your actual performance is, what is your sense of propriety. And people by and large have a sense of fairness. I don't know whether I hold positions or I don't hold positions, but this is one area where I would not like to be on the wrong side.
So when you talk about performance, you've been in office for a little more than 3 months. How do you assess your performance? How's it going?
Well, I'd rather leave that to the others, but there are several constraints. Take Information and Broadcasting Ministry. It has several very good departments. But people think that the I&B ministry is Doordarshan. And Doordarshan is an incorrigible media. Well, it has the publications division, the DAVP, the Directorate of Field Publicity, the Song and Drama division. These are smaller units which keep doing a lot of good things. But the visible face of the ministry is only Doordarshan. And the ministry has really very little to do with Doordarshan, because today there is a legal framework, there is Prasar Bharati. But still, as somebody who's accountable, you have to slowly push things in a direction where things improve, some change is visible. And I have been, in my own little way, trying to push things for some kind of an improvement in Doordarshan. I must say that a lot of members of the Doordarshan team themselves are cooperating a lot. I have a lot of sense of satisfaction that on the 26th of January, we start a regular channel in Kashmir for the people of Kashmir. It'll go a long way because it'll help people in the valley to see Indian programs. We've roped in a lot of private programmers in it, private channels in it, with the same kind of staff strength. Since I've been saying that Doordarshan is overstaffed, without adding many people, in 6 different regional languages, we've been able to start on the 1st of January, round-the-clock regional satellite channels.
How much of that is a question of leadership?
I think it's a question of motivating people, guiding people, and getting them an impression that you are keeping an eye on them.
Soon after you took office, you'd said that one of your goals would be to eliminate the need for a Ministry of Information and Broadcasting.
I seriously believe that. You see, if the governments are to be downsized, we must look for ministries which we won't have a few years from now.
So in what ways are you moving in that direction?
For instance, in case Prasar Bharati as an institution, with whatever legitimate relationship it will have with the government, an institutional framework can be created for a public broadcaster. You don't require a ministry to deal with it. Similarly, if we can create, and that's one area that I've been working on, a proper broadcasting law for India, an institutional framework for broadcasting, the broadcasting authority would take over. You don't need the ministry to deal with it.
Do you genuinely believe that this is politically feasible and practical and possible and may happen during your tenure as a minister?
Well, I won't make a tall claim. I don't know whether it will or it will not. But for instance, if the Prasara Bharati structures in its proper functioning can be put into place with proper professionalism, with proper accountability, if the broadcasting authorities can be created under the broadcasting law and be put in place, then for small departments like the audiovisual publicity and so on, or the PIB, you don't require a regular ministry. These can be attached anywhere.
The most cynical view perhaps on Prasar Bharati is that since the government is going to control it in one manner or the other, and whether it's sort of visibly, publicly done or it's clandestinely done, we might as well put in place mechanisms that make it apparent and make the government in some measure accountable, and stop sort of fooling around with this.
To some extent, I agree with you. The Prasara Bharati is a public property. It belongs to the people of India. The greatest check for it functioning in a non-partisan manner is the plurality of channels available. If you run a channel in a partisan manner, the ultimate judge is the viewer who will switch the remote and go on to the next channel. Therefore, you must be very clear about your objects, but at the same time, there must be some relationship at the center and the state, the entire government mechanism, where there is a legitimate relationship between the governments and Prasara Bharati. And by legitimate relationships, I don't mean clandestinely pulling strings, where, let us say, as a public broadcaster, the Prasara Bharati should be expected, whether it's the central government or the state governments, to give adequate coverage to various developmental programs of the government.
So what nature of relationship do you see between government and Prasar Bharati that would enable him to exercise this, well, shall we say, influence?
I would say that there has to be a forum, an interface between the government and Prasara Bharati, where there is a legitimate place for various activities of the government. This is not necessarily the activities of a partisan or a political character, but connected with the running of the state. For instance, a public broadcaster in a cyclone situation is expected to behave in a particular manner. A public broadcaster in relation to an ecological campaign of the government will behave in a particular manner. Therefore, it is in these areas, I have no doubt that once we set the systems in order, a legitimate public service broadcaster would give adequate place for these kind of campaigns.
You've come into a structure which has essentially been perceived to have been managed by governments and political parties at different times.
Because it was always a department of the government.
So to what degree have you felt these pressures yourself?
Not much. Because if you see, a lot of Prasara Bharati is entertainment, it is education, it is cultural programs, it is information. The area of fairness in terms of absence of bias comes really in the current affairs and the news programs.
Well, there's a whole news channel now which creates a space for that kind of...
But today, the news channel also has competition. Therefore, if the news channel were to have a discussion where only people of one ideology were called, the news channel won't do well. You, let's say, I won't say you, but a lot of people like you do programs for that news channel. How much have you felt in recent years, compared to what would have happened 5 years or 10 years ago, the kind of pressures to give slants? Because today, ultimately, it's the producers, it's the anchors who decide whom to invite, and they normally make it a point to invite a plurality of opinion.
I think also that there is a great deal of frustration amongst professionals who interface with Doordarshan and All India Radio. Doordarshan in particular, at the bureaucracy, at the corruption, at just being able to cope with the structures in the institution. What thought have you given to changing, working on this aspect? There are 40,000 employees who seem to be doing very little.
See, 40,000 employees, of which more than half are perhaps the engineering staff, because you have a large transmitter network. Therefore, you have to utilize these staff members in your till they retire in the transmission activities itself. The Prasara Bharati is now busy formulating its new norms for staffing pattern in which they can be deployed and a larger number of transmitters can run across the day than only run a few hours a day. Similarly, as far as the question of corruption is concerned, some very positive steps have been taken. I'll underline two. The areas which people owed Prasara Bharati, agencies, etc., were very high. You decided not to deal with people who were not paying up. And you've been able to cut them down by less than half today. Similarly, on your major channels, commissioning of programs, which was one important source of corruption. You commission a program, you pay the gentleman, and therefore you have a discretion in whom you will pay. So the commissioning has been replaced by sponsorship. And by sponsorship, there is a little discretion left. Now, the only area which has to be streamlined is that even in the process of selecting the sponsored programs, rather than leave it to one individual, committees have been set up, that it is more than one person who will decide. And I think here also we have to make sure that we are able to get the right kind of people who take these decisions.
And as you've mentioned that Doordarshan seems to get most of the limelight, radio has been so neglected in its potential.
And I think it's a wonderful organization. When I travel across the country, I meet the Doordarshan and the radio executives, and I find the radio executives are all neglected, but all of them are very positive, all of them are very enthusiastic, their programs are of very good quality. I have a little hope in radio. I think the FM channels are going to result in even the resurgence of radio as a commercial broadcaster. And on the FM channels will piggyback the normal lifeline of the radio back. There are a lot of very good programs. For instance, if there is one institution in India which has kept classical music alive, that's radio. And the All India Radio seems to be working very well. It's just that in cities the television seems to have taken over.
You know, over the sort of decades, literally, we've had so many committees, so many promises, so many agenda. What kind of commitment, without a time frame, because that may be sort of difficult to get, but if you were to hazard one, what kind of commitment, what kind of vision, what can you say to the people of India that in 1 year, 6 months, 2 years, this is what I hope to achieve and to give you with the public broadcaster, All India Radio and Doordarshan?
Well, two things. One, with regard to private broadcasters, I will set up the institutional mechanisms which will deal with them. I'll attempt to do that. With regard to the public broadcaster, which is Doordarshan and All India Radio, we will try and improve upon their quality and credibility. We are also trying to improve upon their systems. It's a very difficult task. Only time will tell whether I succeed or not.
What are some of the elements of this improvement? There's the sort of frustration of people within the organization and without, that you have, sort of chief executives keep changing. We don't have a Prasar Bharati board. It's all sort of ad hoc. How long before we will have some kind of...
we must tackle the problem in reality. And the problem really is that in the administrative functioning of Prasara Bharati, you have to professionalize yourself. I've always said that Prasara Bharati needs a management cell, a proper marketing cell, where all the...
But how long before we're going to see these in place?
Well, at the last meeting of the Prasara Bharati board, the present board, though truncated, has passed a resolution deciding to set up a marketing cell. They are employing people and this will run across the country. Two, you need to exploit the in-house talent to the highest. And I've been visiting several parts of the country, and I find in a lot of places outside Delhi, the level of enthusiasm is far more. In West Bengal, Maharashtra, and the 4 southern states, on the 1st of January, with the same staff, they've started 24-hour satellite channels in regional languages. They have news in Tamil and news in the regional languages, news several times a day. I was in Gujarat the other day, and I was told that almost functioning without regular correspondence, the Gujarati news at 7 o'clock on the Gujarat satellite channel is one of the most popular news bulletins. I checked it up with various people, they said so. Therefore, you have to motivate that sense of professionalism in the team within the Prasara Bharati. You must from outside get the best talent. You must select them on basis of their sheer ability. And I find even in the news channel, the sports capsule, the news roundup, some of the discussion formats have been improving slowly. The breakfast show I see has been improving. I think the quality of news presentation has to substantially improve. And once the quality of news presentation improves, the face of Doordarshan looks better, because that's how people judge it.
Now, how does how does a minister who needs to be sort of only discreetly, if at all, involved and to nudge these improvements, what kind of relationship have you established for yourself with these changes?
I think you must only suggest changes, and if these are taken as suggestions for improvement, everybody will welcome it. We appointed the three-man committee, Narayan Murthy and Kiran Karnik and Shunu Sen. Once the report comes, I intend giving my own comments on the report, and I'll send the report to the Prasar Bharati board. After all, if you do it with a sense of improvement, I have no doubt that the board may agree or disagree with me, but they'll welcome it. But if you do it with the idea that I want X to be given a program and Y to be given a program and only this viewpoint to be broadcast, then it becomes something which is not appreciated by people. So every time I've made suggestions for improvement, I have found the greatest cooperation from the Prasar Bharati staff.
To go back to you, what has being a minister done to the rest of your life?
Well, it hasn't changed my life substantially, in the sense that I used to spend almost 14-15 hours working as a lawyer. I work the same amount. I travel a lot more now. Weekends I go out. But otherwise I've tried to make sure that I lead almost this life with the same attitudes as I was.
So if one was to try and sort of define an attitude, a philosophy, and an umbrella idea to your life unfolding, what might it be?
I don't know. I started off as a student leader. I passed through a 22-year phase as a lawyer. I've now become a minister. I don't know. But one thing I'm very certain about, I will continue to be a political activist. What will be my role as an activist, whether I work in my party or elsewhere, my associations and my activism would continue.
Arun Jaitley, thank you very much. That's been good.